Great. So welcome everybody to this Club Safeguarding Officers Network session. We're going to have three parts to this session. The first part, which will be about 45 minutes, I hope, hopefully not going to be too much longer than that, will be the tour planning and risk assessment workshop that I've been promising for some time. I'm going to have a short break then, and then Vivian Rimmer from the safeguarding team at the head of the safeguarding team at the RFU has very kindly agreed to give us an update on what's new at the RFU. Is there someone who can see? This is going to be difficult now because I'm going to have to try and admit people. Okay. And then the last session will be our Herts pitch-side behaviour policy, which we launched last week. Can I see who's coming in? Because I can hear people clicking in, but I've got no way of actually seeing whether I can admit them or not. Michelle, can you see that?
That was Ian. He's in.
He's in. Yep. Look good. Okay. Back onto the.
Jeff, I've got rights to let people in for some reason, so I'm happy to keep an eye on the lobby.
No, please.
Whilst you crack on. Yeah, go for it.
Please, I'd be grateful if you did that. That'd be really, really good. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay, so we're going to be referring to these documents this evening. The RFU trips, tours and overnight stays, which came out last year. This updated the old previous touring with children guidance that was due for a revamp, and the new document is much better, much more user friendly, and also brings us into line with World Rugby's definitions, which I'll talk about in a moment. And as a result of that, we felt that we needed to produce our rugby tours, trips and overnight stays approval protocol, because of course we have delegated authority from the RFU to sign off and approval for tours that are leaving the union, or for those that are coming into the union from abroad or to abroad. So that's what we did, and that's going to form the basis of the documents we produced here in the centre. Those are resources which are on the safeguarding pages of the Herts RFU website. So if you can navigate to the Herts RFU website, find safeguarding and get to the bottom of that, you'll see that there are some resources here, and I'm going to be talking about those through the course of the first 45 minutes or so. What we want to try and do in this workshop is to provide you with a greater awareness and understanding of mandatory activity when planning rugby tours and trips. There's not that much, to be fair, in terms of mandatory activity, because most of it is recommended good practice, but there are some must-dos, and when you read the protocol in full, you'll see that it's aligned with must-dos, should-dos and could-dos, and most of it is in the should-do, but we're going to talk about a must-do in a moment. We're going to look at a couple of worked examples, and we're going to use those worked examples to illustrate the templates that I've drafted and put together for you to use, or not. They're not mandatory. You're not obliged to use them. I spent a bit of time developing some templates because I thought you might find it useful and helpful to use to help you plan your tours, and I'll talk to that when I come to those that section. Here's the first must do and the first should do. Then a tour is now clearly defined in accordance with the with World Rugby's definition. So a tour is something that happens when you leave your union and you go elsewhere to play rugby. That's the key thing. It's got to be involving playing rugby, and also if you've got somebody from outside the union coming in to play rugby. So clearly anything that is in Europe is a tour, as well as anything that also emanates or goes to Spain. To Wales or to Scotland as well as to Northern Ireland. And this other two parts of that definition is trips and overnight stays. And if we're not calling those things that happen within the union tours, then we have to call them something. So a trip is something that's a period of travel away from the club, and an overnight stay involves an overnight stay of one night or more. I think in many respects we all talk about, don't we, tours. We're going on tour, and most of those tours will be within the union. So, we're not too precious about what you refer to it as. But in terms of the official definition, a tour is outside and a trip or an overnight stay is inside. The thing that highlight so is that if it's outside the union, it must be approved by the CB. And that's that for 8th grade rugby. That's me. I sign those off. And what we say for the those trips that occur within the union, we say that it's good practice for you to follow that approval protocol and use that for approving tours within your club. And there should be some sort of formal sign-off process to enable you to travel within union. And hopefully I'll rationalise that as we go through the rest of the session. What I want to try and tell you now, I'm conscious there might well be some project managers on the call. I want to try and sell the concept of a rugby tour to you as a project. And if you think of it that way, because it really is, I mean, a project is it's a unique transient endeavour we hear undertaken to achieve planned objectives. That's the APM Association of Project Managers definitions. But I think it gives us an opportunity to say there's a lot of things to do here. There's a lot of planning to do. And it's useful to try and make sure we've got the right personnel in place, the right plan in place. We've got a timeline. We've got the right team around us to be able to help us to do those activities and to regularly meet and undertake tasks to get things done. We've got a sponsor or we've got an executive, somebody at the top who's going to sign it off and give approval. And finally, when we come back from tour, and this is the thing I think that nobody does or hardly anybody does, I'll be corrected. I'll be glad to be corrected. And that's some post-tour learning. You know, what went well and what did we do well and what should we do next time better. So a suggested timeline of your tour project, your trip project. First of all, I think if you're going to take that kind of approach, then have some structure. So appoint your personnel and set out how often, how frequently you're going to have your meetings. And if you've got a good team around you, I suggest you're meeting quite frequently. If it's a complex tour or a trip which involves lots of things and lots of organisation, then you might want to meet every week or a couple of weeks or maybe even a month if it's not so complex. I'm going to talk about scoping the itinerary in a moment. I think that's the first thing you should do, and I'll explain why you should do that first and how much depth I think you should go into when you're doing that. And then we come to the checklist and plan and prioritise your activity and track it and allocate actions to people using a checklist. And as I say, we've produced a checklist, which I think you might find useful, but you don't have to use it if you've got one that's equally as good or better. Of course, you've got to propose your itinerary to members, your 8th grade members and their parents, and obtain consent. I'll be talking about consent at the end of this. And finally, you're ready. Once you've got people signed up to it and agreeing to the itinerary, you've got to commit to spending. And for some people, it's going to be a lot of money. So you want to make sure that you're giving good, accurate information to everybody before they start putting their hands in their pockets, because some people might find that it might be out of reach and you might need to rethink the parameters of your tour. And then in order to get your tour approved, certainly if it's a tour out of union, then you need to be assessing the risks, or more accurately, assessing the risks and coming up with some form of management plan to ensure that those risks are managed for your project. And then submit it to me for approval if it's an incoming tour to the union or an outgoing tour to the union. But if you're just doing it outside of the CB but within the union, then it goes to your club executive, following hopefully the same kind of steps that you would have done for an outgoing tour. Okay, scoping the itinerary. I'm not so sure. I'm not sure that I'm not suggesting that you have lots of things, lots of project management tools around us, like a Gantt chart and lots and lots and lots of spreadsheets. You know, it's not like that. This is not a kind of a big thing, but this is really important. I think this first part, your scoping of the itinerary, and it might seem like I'm stating the obvious. But you need to be really clear, I think, about what you want from your tour, because you've got to tell people and make sure that they're ready to commit to forking out for it. I think the phrase, if you plan to get a reindeer and you don't do it right and you end up with a goat, then that's the kind of analogy that I would liken to this. If you haven't actually ensured you're very clear about what it is that you want from your tour. And I know from experience there's a temptation to try something really ambitious. You want to give people a really, really good experience. This is something that they might only ever do once in their 8th grade journey, or maybe even a couple of times, and you want to give them something really good and worthwhile to look back on, but try not to be too ambitious. I think if you keep it simple, above all, keep it affordable, that means you'll end up with an inclusive tour, and you'll also hopefully end up with your tour being child focused. You don't want this to be all about the adults and the grown-ups. This is about taking their kids away and giving them a really, really good experience. So all of these things you need to consider, they're all on the screen there. You can see what you want to do while you're there, where you're staying, how you're going to get there, what's your transport going to look like, do you need travel insurance, and is it affordable? So what, you got your itinerary ready, you're happy with it, that meets your needs, you should of course then send it out to your parent group. So make sure that they're clear that what it is they're going to be signing up for. It doesn't have to be in too great a details. Maybe just one sheet on one document or an email. But clearly you need to be telling them how much it's going to cost them and when they're going to be going away. And starting your planning in earnest, then your checklist. I'm going to try and link into this link. This first checklist on the left here is the appendix from the back of the RFU's trips, tours, and overnight stays guidance, and it's a good checklist. It's a PDF, part of a PDF document. So if you're thinking of printing it off, you can't actually do an awful lot with it other than just tick boxes and write things in the notes section, which is why, as I say, we've produced this spreadsheet. There's another checklist here which I want to draw your attention to. I'm going to try and see if this will come up in the as another window. I hope this is going to come up as a pop. Hey, there we go. It's worked. Excuse me. This is from the RFU website, and it's from the club management section of the RFU website. And it's a tour checklist here, which is, I think it's more geared towards an adult or a senior tour. And it gives you a list of things that you should consider. Doesn't give you anywhere to write anything down, but it gives you a list of things that you should consider. But anyway, that's quite a comprehensive one. So if you're looking for other ideas, maybe just check that one out as well. Okay, so we're going to go into our checklist that we produced, and I wanted to show it to you. You'll find it here amongst this list of documents. This is this document here, tour planning and risk assessment document here. And it's a spreadsheet. And let's see this pop up, see if it pops up. Is it going to? Brilliant, there we are. So I've fixed this so we can scroll up and you can see what's on here. So this is your first bits about your planning, your purpose. Have you got obtained parental consent? And the key to this is that it's got blank fields that you can enter text into to enable you to chart your progress with your plan. And you can use this on a regular basis to update everybody who's involved in the tour committee, and everybody can have copies. You can perhaps save it on your own shared drive. You can allocate actions on it to give them to people. You can see when it's supposed to be, put deadlines in there, when it's supposed to be completed by, and there's also a space to identify some risks and what the risk might be. We've got to do some more work with the risks in this tab at the bottom here, the risk assessment and actions, but we're going to talk about that in the next 10 minutes or so. But anyway, this is your spreadsheet. We're going to use some worked examples to see how this might work. And you can see the sort of areas that we're talking about: fixtures, non-rugby activities. And you'll see that this bears a striking resemblance to the checklist in the RFU's guidance, and that's because we use that to form the basis of this spreadsheet. But this is a tool. It's a tool you can use as a plan. So let me just come out of this and back into the slideshow. Okay, so here's our first worked example. Have a look at this then. Let's talk about this particular tour in a moment. Read it first. So Old Kimptonians, they're mini section. They're off to play in the Holt Festival. I'm sure there are many people here who've been to the Holt Festival. It's a fantastic event. And they're going to be staying in Great Yarmouth in California Cliffs. They're all going together as family units, so they're staying together in caravans for 2 nights, and they're all going to have access to the holiday camp entertainment and the pool. In order to try and keep the cost down, they've decided they're going to do some beach games run by the coaches and parent helpers on a Saturday. They're going to have a team meal and some family free time in the evening, and then you're going to go and play your festival, your rugby festival on Sunday, and you're going to travel home afterwards. And of course, everybody gets their ubiquitous goodie bag and tour t-shirt, and that's going to be factored into the cost. So let's see how that works and that fits into our spreadsheet. And here's the first one here. Let's see this pop up. Now I've entered these in red font just simply to make them much more visible. In reality, if I was planning this, I wouldn't use red. I would only use red or a different color font if I was providing an update for a subsequent meeting. So I'd put all my initial information into here. I use this as the plan to brief the whole of the team, and then next time we get together, if there's any update, I would enter it in red font. And you can see that this one, the itinerary here, put together and send out to families. JB, whoever he is, has been given the responsibility to put the itinerary together and to send it out to families, and that person has got to do it by the 31st of October 2026. This tour is going in 2027, by the way, so that's a long planning period. As you can see here, we've already done some good scoping, so we're really in a good position to be able to give some information to our families. We can tell them that depending on your family size or the size of caravan you want, it's going to cost you 255, 290, 345, etc. We can give them some options about where they'd like to stay. We've got somebody who's going to be allocated to get the tour shirts or underwear. We're going to get some fundraising underwear. So all of this sort of thing goes into our tour plan here in this way. I want to show you this one. There's a couple here that I've illustrated just for the purposes of being able to show us how the risk assessment would work. This is individual medical issues. Now, you're going away with a lot of children, and some of them might well have pre-existing medical conditions, maybe diabetes, maybe asthma, maybe something else. And we're not sure. We don't want to make sure that we don't get anything wrong for those children, that we're in a position to be able to treat them early. So we're going to show that as a risk, something that we're going to need to do a bit more work on and around our risk assessment. And again, I'll explain that a little bit later. And secondly, there's another one here. We're not too sure about the beach. We've had a look at it on Google Maps and we think it looks all right, but we haven't been there, and we want to make sure it's got nothing unsafe on it, no broken glass, nothing that might come to any harm. So we're going to show that as a risk as well, because it will prompt us to do some work when we get there. Okay, we're going to look at the risks in a moment, but what I want to do now is to look at our second tour. So this is our second worked example. And this is Old Kimptonians under 15s boys. And they're going to be travelling to Snowdonia. And of course, we all know that's out of the Union because it's in Wales. They're going to be staying in bunk room style accommodation Friday to Sunday. And they're going to be playing a couple of Welsh rugby teams in North Wales in a triangular fixture on the Sunday. They've managed to borrow a couple of school minibuses, and they've got 6 volunteers, 3 coaches and a couple of parent helpers, 5 volunteers to travel with the party. So Saturday is going to be outward bound activities, and they've managed to secure some outward bound activities from an external provider. And they're going to do some canyoning and abseiling, which are quite physical exercises, activities, and they're going to bring with them some additional risks as well. So there we got that team meal, and they're going to do some indoor games at night. Then there's a rugby on Sunday, and then they're going to travel home afterwards, all wearing their tour t-shirts. So let's look at that one then in our worked example. Find my mouse, there it is. So this is a different one. Our tour committee are different people here. We've got the same kind of activities at the start here, you know, identifying itinerary, getting it well costed. So when we're clear about how much it's going to cost, whether you're going to be paying paying for the activities or not paying for the activities. I've got some fundraising with a sponsored car wash, etc. We've got some stuff around the minibuses. Now, I think there will also be some risks here associated with that. We haven't mentioned them at the moment because, of course, we've only got a short time to talk about it. But there will be, and no doubt, you know, we'll show that properly in the risk assessment. I've chosen these to look at. So these ones here. 2 groups of 11 room allocation, 2 groups of 11 in 2 separate barns, and a third bunk barn for 6 adult volunteers. I'm going to allocate the rooms based on a random selection. And that's an interesting question in itself. You know, are you going to use friendship groups, or are you just going to put the names in a hat? That would be interesting. But we've heard a whisper that some of these boys are going to be sneaking some cans of alcohol into their room. So we want to show that as a risk because we want to make sure that we do some work to enable us to manage that bit properly, that risk properly. I've got another risk here. Oops, gone too far. Another risk here. This is the activity centre. We're worried about the physicality of those activities. We know that we want to give them a really good experience, and it's a good outdoor experience, but we want to make sure that it's nice and safe, and that we've checked out this provider properly, and they've got proper insurance in place, and they've got, you know, proper training for their staff. So that's our we've used this as our plan, and as I say, we'd report developments on this to each successive meeting as we go through by adding text and making sure we're on track. Okay, let's go back into the slideshow. Where are we at? So let's talk about risk now. Then when we talk about risk assessment, we don't just mean assessment. We always mean risk management. It's no good just assessing risk if you don't come up with a method by which you're actually going to control the risk. So various organizations define risk as a number of different things depending on what their perspective is, but most of these definitions include words like uncertainty, adverse event, undesirable outcome or loss. The health and safety executive, which I think is probably most appropriate to us, defines it as this. And risk is the relationship between the likelihood of a hazard giving rise to harm and the severity of that harm. And those are key words. Involved in safeguarding as we are, we're very familiar with what harm might mean. Not so much maybe a hazard. So let's try and unpick that. So we're going to use the, again, as a variety of different risk management processes that are kicking around. The one that we've chosen to use is the one that fits the best, is the health and safety executive one. And there are 5 steps to this risk assessment. So we're going to identify the hazard first, including who would be impacted by the hazard. We're going to assess the risk using a calculation of that relationship that I mentioned, that likelihood times the severity. That will give us a numerical assessment of what the risk might mean, and that will dictate to us how we might, what sort of energy and resources we need to put into actually controlling that risk. And then we're going to use some form of some risk assessment template or a method to record the findings. So we've got our accountability in place there. We want to make sure if anybody calls for a risk assessment, as they are, if you often do when things go wrong on tour, that we've got it written down and we can show that we've actually been diligent in the way we've approached this. And then finally, we're going to review the controls. Are they effective? Are they going to work? And if necessary, we're going to reassess the risk. So let's look at identifying that hazard first. And again, those first 5 types of hazard are common: physical, chemical, biological, ergonomic, and environmental. So for instance, in our under 15s tour to Snowdonia, clearly there will be physical hazards that we need to take account of, such as the canyoning and the abseiling. They'll be physical. But because we're involved in safeguarding, and because we know that with kids, risks can occur, or hazards can come at a variety of different circumstances. We're going to add a couple here. So we're going to add psychosocial, and we're going to add financial. And the reason I've added these two is because I think psychosocial is really pertinent to safeguarding, to child protection, to ensuring that the children that we're travelling with are not unduly affected or impacted by anything that might come their way. And that might cover things like, for instance, poor mental health might come within that. Or maybe some sort of substance misuse might come within that as well. And of course, financial is important because for some people, this will be a significant outlay. And if we find all of a sudden that our provider that we've chosen to use is put the prices right up, we need to consider whether people can still afford that and whether there might be some financial harm should they still decide to go ahead with it. And of course, some might not be able to afford it anyway. We might need to be thinking about using any hardship funds that we might have access to. Now, who might be harmed? Now, this can be anybody, and I think the scope of this is quite wide, but it might be very particular depending on what the hazard is. So, of course, we might need to think about particular children that might be affected, or a group of children. Any of the volunteers that might have an impact, might be harmed by anything. The group itself, the parental group, perhaps if they're involved. And also we have to think about the club. Are the club going to suffer any reputational damage from anything that might occur? And of course the sport as well. And of course we must always, as our priority, think about the children that are in our charge. But it's also worth noting that sometimes if things do go awry on a tour, that there could be some reputational damage to the sport and to the club as well. So there's the things I think that we need to consider. So we talked already about this probability. What's the likelihood of the hazard occurring? And secondly, what's the impact? What's the severity of the harm should it come to fruition? And we're going to do that on a 5x5 matrix. And let me have a quick show to you of this. This is our blank template, which I'm pulling up again. So this is the planner that we showed you earlier. This tab down the bottom here, the risk assessment and actions. Let's go into that one. And you'll see here we've got a grid, a template here, which enables you to think about how you might calculate this risk. And across the top here, we've got impact. What's the potential severity of the outcome? And we start with insignificant and we go to severe. Insignificant might be a kind of a sticking plaster injury or a scrape or a bruise. Severe might be something like a catastrophic injury or even death. Significant might be something like a fracture or a broken limb, something like that. Well, that actually, to be fair, that actually might be major. Significant might be, let's say, think of significant financial loss might occur within that one. So probability, what's the likelihood of the harm occurring? And again, almost certain here gets the highest score. So if it's almost certain it's going to happen, then your risk control measure might be pretty much taken out of your hands. If it's rare, if it's highly unlikely that it's going to occur, then it might be something you can actually bear. You can live with that. You can go with that because it's not going to knock your multiplier up very high at all. And of course, you can see how this multiplies up as we go along here. And we talked about having to record what our risk assessment is. And here's a table that enables you to do just that. And this, I think, contains everything that you need in here. Reflect the checklist items here. So what part of the section is in your checklist from here, this bit, planning, personnel, being there, etc. What part of that are you going to put in here? What's the nature of the hazard? Who can be harmed? What's the probability? The nature and seriousness of any harm, and be specific here. I think you need to be detailed about what you need to put in here. So what sort of harm are you talking about? What your current assessment of risk might be using your matrix, action that you've taken to mitigate that risk. And you'll notice I've put 4 words in here. I'm going to talk about those in a moment. And then finally, following the action you've taken to mitigate the risk, what's the residual risk? How have you reassessed it and when have you closed it? Let's go back into the slideshow. So risk management and control. Again, various organizations will talk about different ways you can describe this. The police, I think, use one reduce, avoid. I can't remember what the other two are, to be fair, but I think I picked these four out as being quite easy to understand and to be able to deal with. So tolerate. Of course, you might assess your risk as being so low that might still be a kind of a slight worry, but you might be happy to just run with that. You might be quite happy to tolerate it. It doesn't need any particular control measures. You might need to treat it. You might need to change the parameters of your activity, make some changes to how you're going about things, make some changes to your transport arrangements, for instance, put another person in place. If you're climbing heights, you might need to make sure that you've got proper harnesses in place, you've got proper ropes, and you've checked them, etc. Transferring the risk, that's about maybe passing the risk on to somebody else. Are you sure that it's you that's actually responsible for controlling this? Maybe if you're going to Wales and you're going to be doing some activity with an outdoor centre, then you would expect them to be bearing some of that risk and to be able to explain to you how they're going to manage and control that risk themselves. And finally, terminate. It might well be that the activity is so risky, your risk assessment has come out so high that you just can't go ahead with it. You're going to have to just terminate that particular activity or part of that activity. So let's see how that transposes into our scenarios. Sorry, I've got one more slide, actually. Bear with me. There we are. Here's our worked example, the first one. And I mentioned these already. You're worried about understanding which of the children might have pre-existing medical conditions and whether that could lead to any of them being harmed by not being treated quickly. And also you want to make sure that the beach for your organised activities is safe and free from potential hazards. I would just say, again, I stress to you, these are just two that we've chosen just to illustrate how this works. Of course, there's got to be a whole host of risks in here, not least of which are around things like using the holiday camp swimming pool, for instance, or any other piece of equipment that might be there. So let's have a look and see how we've assessed that risk. That's the planning template. So we'll go into the risk assessment and actions, and we'll see how we've recorded those here. So there's the medical issues ones. We've said that's a biological hazard. And it's very specific to age grade players that might have specific medical conditions. I've assessed this as a 3 and a 3, although I think if I'm honest, I'm erring on the side of caution there. It's probably more likely to be a 2 or a 2 and etc. Anyway, but for the purpose of this exercise, this has given us a medium, according to our grid here. It's given us a medium assessment of risk, which means that we need to still put a fair degree of resources and energy into actually controlling that risk. So we're going to treat it. We're going to ensure that medicines or other aids are readily available. We're going to transfer it as well. We're going to make sure that parents who are coming with us, they can manage any untoward incidents. So we're going to transfer some of that risk across to the parents and make sure that they're responsible as well. Whereas we'll take responsibility if for those times when the kids are with us, maybe playing rugby or during a training session. And then the non-rugby activities, we talked about the beach, potential physical hazards. Children will be affected, and it's a very, very low probability of harm, very, very low in the terms of the seriousness, and we've said that that's actually quite low. So we're going to tolerate that, save for a very short beach inspection before we actually undertake the activities to make sure everything's very safe. So there we are. We have a documented risk assessment that we can produce and we can show to people if we get asked questions. Well, what did you do to make sure that the children were safe? This is what we did. So let's look at our next worked example. Our under 15. So a parent has said that she thinks the boys have been planning to sneak some cans of beer into the bunk room. And we think that's very reliable intelligence. So we want to take that seriously enough. And secondly, you want to be assured the children will be safe doing the outdoor activities in the wild. That's your concern. That's what your worry is. So we're going to go to our next. There it is. That's our under 15s tour checklist. We'll go to the risk assessments and actions here. And our assessment starts with this. That's it. In the being there section. Physical and psychosocial. Illicit consumption of alcohol by players, and it's affecting age grade players, specifically under 15s. And we've assessed this as the probability 3, because we think that's pretty good intelligence that we got there. And we know that these are 15, and if there's a lot of alcohol consumed, then that might be quite major, quite come to major harm. Again, you know, we can quibble with these if you wish. I mean, these are very subjective assessments. Excuse me, subjective assessments, and that, of course, that's what a risk assessment is all about, which is why there should be more than one person involved in it. But at the end of the day, you've put a process around it. You've, in good faith, assessed what the risks might be, which has enabled you to come up with the right sort of level of control measures. We think that's high, so the risk is high. We're going to treat that. We're going to give the boys a session on core values, focusing on the risks of alcohol consumption, and we're just going to hope that they're going to listen to us. We're going to another treat. We're going to appoint room captains to make sure that they've got some responsibility for making sure that of the safety of the boys in their rooms. And we're going to also do some visual kit inspections on departure to make sure that they haven't got anything on them that they shouldn't have. And we think that then knocks our risk down to 6. It's still a kind of a risk that we need to control, so that would mean our surveillance needs to be heightened, etc. But for the moment, we can probably tolerate that at the moment, because it's with these extra controls in here. Perhaps that surveillance should go in there, actually, that action to mitigate. And secondly, the non-rugby activities. Injury caused from canyoning or abseiling, again, that's going to happen to age grade players. Probability, because we've got some faith in the organisation that we're booked with, we're going to put that as a 2. But if something does happen, it's going to be quite serious, but we think that's medium. So this is our control measures. Check their liability insurance, check the activity centre review on the and their website reviews and their website to increase your confidence in their credentials, and ask the centre about DBS checks and training of staff and the quality of equipment used, and have those conversations with them nice and early, so you can be assured you can then knock your risk assessment down to that level that we've said there, and we can be confident that we're going to give the kids a good experience, and we've assessed that risk, and we're quite assured of this of the safety. Okay, you can't account for this. Of course, if anything can go wrong, it follows that it will go wrong. And I think there's a famous phrase people often attribute it to Sun Tzu, but I don't think it was him who said it, and that's the best plans don't survive first contact with the enemy, which I think is a bit of a pessimistic view. My view is that if you plan it well, you will reduce the opportunity for risks occurring. Don't forget that your first thing the RFU will call for if anything goes wrong on tour is the risk assessment. And also make sure that everyone is clear about the boundaries of acceptable behaviour, because the biggest problem on tour ends up being as a result of poor behaviour. And the last bit we want to look at is obtaining consent and undertakings. Come on, move on. Move the slideshow on. It's not moving on. Okay, let's look at this anyway. I've moved on too far. Excuse me. Right, okay, consent and undertakings for a rugby tour. Again, this is another template that we've developed. Have to use it. It's here if you need it. There's a perfectly satisfactory consent form as part of the RFU's tour resources on the in the tour section in the RFU. Of course, you know that could be your first port of call anyway, and you won't go wrong by using those. That they've been well resourced, well put together. These are just things that we've put together to help you to because we think that, you know, they may help you to run a successful tour. I started using these on the tours that I run, undertakings, because I felt it give a really good opportunity to set out your stall right from the very outset, so that the parents and the children knew what was expected of them on tour. it's a bit of a delicate balancing act, because you want them to go away and have fun and not be worried about being a little bit extravagant or outrageous, but you do want them to be very, very well aware of what their boundaries are and what their limits are. So we started this with what the club has promised that they will provide for people on the tour, and then we said what we expect the players to do and what we expect the parents and carers to do, and that includes paying for the tour as well. We've put in some information there about photography and some information about medical consent and dietary requirements. These, I think, we felt were quite important to ensure that we had that information up front at the point that we supplied the itinerary. We say, this is where you're going, this is how much it's going to cost. Now have a look at what we're undertaking to do for you and what you're undertaking to do for us while we're there. And this form is, again, it's just an adaptation or a bit of an advancement on the form that is in the RFU tour resources. But we've included a place for the player to sign, and I think that's important, because children need to be aware of what their responsibilities are, and they need to be given the opportunity to have their thoughts and feelings validated as well. So when we talk about child's voice, it's important that we ensure that they're a part of this process and they're consenting as well, just not their parents on their behalf. Okay, so that's I want to make sure I'm at the right place, because I think I've probably overrun. There we are. And you'll find that, as I say, in this part of the safeguarding pages on the website. And there's the consent for a rugby tour. There it is there. So all of these forms are, use them if you want. Don't use them if you don't want. If you've got something better, that's fine. The things that you must do is you must plan it. You must do a risk assessment for all tours and all trips. You must seek consent. That has to be done. And if you're travelling out of the union, you must get approval from the CB. If you're not travelling outside of the union, then you should get consent, get approval from your club. And I hope that these forms have been useful for you, but will be useful for you in helping you to plan that. So that's the end of that. But there's an opportunity to ask some questions. So let me just come out, find out how I get out of this slideshow, and I'll come back to the main screen. End show. That's how we do it. Come out of that, and that, and that, and that. Right, we're back on the main screen. We're back in the room. I'm sorry that's been all me blaring on. So the opportunity now is to ask some questions about what you've just heard from me. There wasn't much of an opportunity there to participate in that, because I was wanting to get information out to you. So now we're talking about what how I can help you with specific issues. Bruce, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jeff. That was brilliant as ever. Can I just, what's best practice on sign off? Because obviously someone's got to write that, and someone's got to kind of sign it off. So is it best that the CSO stays out of the planning and risk assessment process and then signs it off, or what have you got any views on that?
Yes, I do. I mean, that's interesting. I think your CSO should, good practice would say a CSO should be part of the tour committee, but I wouldn't load up the CSO with any tasks. Your CSO is there just to advise. Oh, I don't like the sound of that. Try something different. That might be something that the CSO might offer you, or you might offer to your tour committee. But I wouldn't. The CSO's got enough to do. I wouldn't expect them to be getting involved in planning activities and organising stuff. As long as you're there to provide advice and just a nod. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Or no, I don't like the sound of that. Try something different. And then ultimately, if you're travelling just within the UK, or sorry, within England, then it's just your club that needs to sign that off, not you and not me. Did that answer your question, Bruce?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thank you. It's perfect.
Anybody else want to ask anything?
Yeah, just a quick question. I was just looking at the musts for within the UK. The RFU kind of.
Sorry, Steve. Just as you spoke there, you had a buzz which overrode everything that you said. Could you start again, please? Sorry.
No, I was just literally just filling this in a few hours ago.
Okay.
So we got tour to Norfolk. Literally your exact tour, near enough.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But I was just reading about the two things we have to do, like must do, was that the parental consent and the CSO approval process. It looks like.
So if you're for that particular tour, you don't need your CSO to approve it, but it's a good idea to have your CSO involved, as I said with Bruce, involved in your tour committee meetings or involved in somewhere in the process, as long as you don't overload which club are you in? Cheshunt, right. So as long as you don't overload Dawn with tasks and activities.
Well, we're literally done. We're going in a week and a half.
Oh, right. Okay. So you're traveling in union. You're traveling in union. You need to put some sort of process in place to ensure that your club have got good oversight of your tour, your trip, should I say? It's not a tour. Good oversight of your trip, so that they are confident that you're going to look after those children while those players and those families, and you've done a good process, and it's all going to be nice and safe for them while they're away. So someone from your club, your executive, should sign that off and say, yes, we've seen this, we're happy with it, off you go, have a good time.
Cool. And do we just generally just use like the Herts form and
so what I didn't mention, there's a couple of forms in there that we've adapted the RFU approval forms, just because those forms are proven to be quite difficult to use, because they're in PDF form. You have to print them off, handwrite them, scan them in, send them off, print it off again, sign it, scan it back in, and we just developed some Word documents to help that to work. So use those if you want. Use the RFU ones if you want. It's not a problem.
Yeah, cool. That's all right. It's just one of the late things we've got, because we're actually off like a couple of weeks.
Could I ask just a very quick question, just for clarification?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm Michael McCorvus, actually Fran from Watford was my son's name. I just wanted to say, when you say someone from the club should sign it off, ideally, to your mind, who should that be?
So I think that needs to be, your club executive will have regular meetings, and I think every tour should get presented to the club executive and be approved by them. So signed off by the chair or the secretary, but somebody who's in one of the golden roles and positions of authority, not your CSO. Your CSO is there to give advice, but I think somebody from your executive should be signing that off. Again, that's not mandatory. That's not in the RFU's guidance. That's what we've said in our guidance is what you should do to make sure that you're actually making your tour safe.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Right. It's
oh, sorry, can I just ask one more question?
Go on, Steve. Yeah.
Which is a difference. I did notice on the form when I filled it in earlier, it was asking about approval from the CB at the other end.
Yes.
I wasn't too sure if the host union had to grant approval anymore, because that sort of disappeared last time I did it.
No. If you're travelling outside of the union, the host union need to also have a corresponding approval process, so that they give them permission for you to visit them in the same way that we would ask clubs from outside of England.
When we did it last year, Herts said we didn't need that anymore, and the RFU didn't need that anymore. We did need it a few years ago. Is that back again then?
I need to look at the form. If you're travelling to Holt in Norfolk.
No, that's just the minis. We're actually going to Denmark as well in June.
Oh, you're going to Denmark. If you go to Denmark, Denmark will need to approve from their end your reception in Denmark.
Yeah, because when we went to Hamburg last year, we were told we didn't need to.
Yeah. So the receiving country, the receiving union will need to approve for their club that's hosting you. Will need to approve for their club that they can host visiting tours.
Right, but they don't need to give us permission, because they used to. They
don't need to give you permission, but you no. They don't need to give you permission.
Has to have incoming permission.
No, they don't need to give you permission, but you need to be clear and assured that the club you're visiting has sought permission from their side.
For an incoming.
Yeah, right. For an incoming.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right, that's all right then, because yeah, that must be difference.
Thanks, Steve. Jermaine, you've got a question?
Yes, so quick question. Sorry, a bit off there. About the parental consent. If we're going with a tour where the parents are bringing their own kids and were therefore responsible for the kids, is that parental consent still required for the tour, or is it just good practice to do it anyway?
So, if I refer you then to there's a paragraph in the RFU trips, tours, and overnight stays guidance, which says that consent is required, and that you should do this in writing. So that's the way it's phrased.
Okay.
And what we've said in our protocol is, look, we're going to make this a must do because, first of all, it gives you an opportunity to find out an awful lot more about the child, the individual child, medical conditions, whether they can swim, everything else, but also gives the opportunity to formulate that kind of contract between you and the parents to say, yes, we're going to come. Yes, this is the way we're going to behave. Yes, we'll pay the money, that kind of thing. So that's the reason why we've said that, we're putting it at that level as opposed to, oh, well, if you want to, because it's not good practice just to say, well, no, let's just go anyway. Yeah.
Cool, brilliant. So that's where it also covered the responsibility, not responsibility. I forgot what the wording is right now.
Yeah. Right. Okay, Jimmy, thanks. Viv, you got a question?
It's just a bit of a reminder, really, just in terms of parental consent. Even if you're going overseas and one parent is attending, just be careful that you meet the requirements of border control in relation to those accompanying parents having permission to take their children out by all those that have got parental responsibility. So there are links that you can have a look on the government website. There are some countries that are much stricter than others. So we had a tour, I think, last year that had some difficulties in South Africa because one of the accompanying parents didn't have consent from the other parent with parental responsibility. So I'm not suggesting that the club need to collate those. It's just to remind those parents who are travelling overseas with their children that they might need to ensure that they've got parental, a letter basically which gives parental consent for the non-attending or from the non-attending parents.
Good, thanks, Viv. That's very helpful. Thanks very much. Okay, so we've reached 8 o'clock now, and I think it's a good time to call a halt. Let's have a break. When we come back, Viv will be giving us an update with some RFU goodies, and then I'm going to finish off with our pitch side policy. So it's 8 o'clock now. Can I suggest that we're back by 10 past, please, at the latest, nice and sharp. If you've just come for the first session for the tour workshop, then I hope you found it useful. Goodbye. Thank you. And if you're staying on to listen to the rest of it, then we'll see you in 10 minutes at 10 past. I'm going to stop the recording now.